What's going on, guys? Mitch from RespectMyRegion.com coming back with another episode of the RMR Podcast today, joined by special guest Kenny Pleasant of Pleasant Trees, opening up here in Washington State. How you doing today, Kenny?
I'm great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's rare. I think I didn't say too much before this about this, but it's very rare for me to have guests from the home state, especially your stores opening up in the city in which I reside of Everett. Man, you got the store. I think you said grand opening. Is it coming this month or next month?
Second week of August.
Second week of August. So
Mhm.
coming right around the corner, just getting in
Mhm.
the game. But I know you've been an entrepreneur in around the space for quite a while from a couple different sides, man. So I'd love to get, the first question I always ask people on the show is their origin story with cannabis, whether that's personal, professional, however you feel vulnerable sharing is up to you. But I'm kind of curious your origin story around cannabis.
Yeah. So growing up in the hood, obviously it was a commodity, right? We pretty much everybody smoked weed, and as you know, tradition had it, I just believe I smoked first time around 12 or 13, and I remember actually a time in my early teens thinking I don't think I would ever not smoke weed. It
Mhm.
was such a part of my day to day. But then when I got older and had kids, I actually did not smoke for over 10 to 15 years and focused on building my real estate business and career. And I actually had a different opinion of it at the time, which I can share if you'd like to know. But
Mhm.
um, I then got involved with my business partner Michael, who was getting into the industry from the liquor stores, and we had met because I was managing the property where his liquor store was at. And he talked about it, and I was vehemently opposed to it. I'm like, "There's no way I'm doing real estate that would be, he'll still have the negative stigma." And I couldn't even imagine having that public um, domain of marijuana before it was legalized in Seattle. And so, yeah, my thought process behind why I was opposed to it basically stemmed from America's relationship with Black people and how there's always been something from slavery to Reconstruction, and the whole story we've all heard, and these different plagues. And I felt like marijuana could be the next thing. And not to say so much that it would be, but I was suspicious of it
Mhm.
because it was rampant in the Black community. And I just feel like we're at a place where we need to be very aware, have a heightened sense of awareness of what we're doing, what's going on around us. And the world is moving at an exponential pace. And if I always used to relate it back to Cat Williams doing his stand up, and he said, "Hungry, happy, sleepy." And that summed it up, in my opinion, at the time. Let me clarify that I have changed my opinion since then. But he talked about hungry, happy, sleepy. And I was, you know, under the premise that if the world is moving at exponential pace, technology, the wealth gap, all these different things that are putting blacks, African Americans so far behind, that it's not a time for us to, sorry about that. It's not the best time for us to be hungry, happy, and sleepy. We need to be aware, focused, and participating in this exponential growth that we're seeing in the world. So um, that was my then opinion.
It's interesting to see that, to go from obviously being a consumer, consuming the plant to that, which I totally understand. Considering the state of the country, not just the current state, but the state of the country in terms of those race relations, and I totally understand and respect that. And it's also interesting to see that shift in perception. What do you feel like was that kind of shift towards away from, like, again, it's not yours wasn't, it doesn't sound like it was like a negative or, oh, cannabis is bad. You were just like, yo, this is something that could potentially dull the senses or the smarts, if you will, a little bit in a world where we need to be super sharp. But what changed from that to kind of flipping the script on cannabis for you?
So as I mentioned, I met Michael Baraki's owner of Kush 21, person I actually bought my store from. Um, but we became really good friends, and as he was building his, empire, I was right there along with him. We would meet, and he gave me a different vantage point of the customers, and a lot of the customers were not what I assumed. Um, they were middle aged, older. They suffered from anxiety or cancer. Just all these different medicinal uses that uh, the customer base was using marijuana for, and as I dug into it and really started to see the medical benefits, all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, actually. And funny enough, being in the stores and around the bud tenders and kind of helping out, I remember having trouble sleeping. And they were like, here, try this. And so I'm like, okay, tried it after, 10, 15 years of not smoking. Next thing you know, I'm sleeping like a baby. And then going through some issues with my wife, and I don't know if you call it middle age crisis or Renaissance period, whatever, but having a sense of anxiety, and so they provided something that took the edge off because I went like our customers, now, and I said, hey, I'm not so much looking to be stoned, intoxicated, but I would like something to take the edge off, and in common fashion, they provided something that was amazing. It was like magic, right? So then I believe it provides me a great sort of perspective to share with others because my it obviously I had the recreational side as a kid where I did a lot of things that I regret, but just being someone that has an opposition to it, open minded, tried it, and now I can say, okay, I see
Mhm.
all sides of the product and how it is consumed and viewed. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest things I think around the stigma for and I think like for years again is isn't necessarily an opposition of like, oh, this is a terrible thing or it's against my religion or whatever. When we think of the stigma against cannabis, sometimes we think about this like big bad conservative, like force their views on everyone. Like that's the only there's a lot of people that have varying stances of why cannabis may be right for them or their thoughts and opinions on it. And I think once like you said, kind of the veil was lifted of looking inside the industry of seeing like, wow, so many people use this plant for so many different reasons in so many different ways. Sure, there's a ton of people that recreationally use cannabis for some people be dabbing, they're trying to get gone, they're trying to go to space and maybe forget about something, maybe just zone out on some video games, whatever, that's their own prerogative. But there's a ton of people out here, whether they're using topicals or CBD or low dose THC or cancer patients, like so many people use cannabis for so many reasons. And I think once someone gets exposed to that with an open mind and sees how wide the use case is and how little the risk is, how little the downside is, because there is, if you're smoking, there is a health risk of that. It doesn't get necessarily talked about enough, but there's a health risk of that. There is a risk of putting any sort of substance in your body. But the risk is very, very low compared to the potential benefits and the use cases around this plan.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm okay with that as well. I did speak on the medicinal benefits, but if a person, we tend to have very strong opinions based on our point of view or our experience, right? But how can we judge someone else when they're going through some sort of tragedy or some
Mm.
sort of life experiences that the marijuana allows them to have a sense or a period of peace and, you know, like just serenity? Then they should be allowed that, right? I can't say, hey, my life is great, and anyone that smokes weed is a loser, and it's bad. That's that would be someone else's point of view, right?
Mhm.
But all of a sudden, if I have something going on and I need to get high, and it allows me to have some peace and escape from this reality, then you should be able to do that, right?
Absolutely. 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 How did building, in real estate, right? Like real estate is one of those industries where there, doesn't necessarily get talked about a lot, but for me, having partaked in the real estate industry, it's a highly regulated business. When you look at a county, at a city, at a state level, there's all sorts of regulations and laws, and not just on zoning, but even advertising and certain things that you can and can't say about properties. And it's a very localized industry as well. When you're looking for buyers and sellers and operating in a particular area, you're looking at a very localized pool, much like owning a dispensary. Your consumer base is very much local to that. So what are some of those experiences you feel like from real estate that are going to transfer over or help transfer over to the cannabis space?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a few parallels. I believe the main one is being in a crowded space, right? Everyone, for the most part, knows at least one real estate agent. And then how do you compete and stand out amongst that, right? So I feel like that's very similar because there's in Seattle, Washington, or Everett, the most of the state, there's weed shops everywhere, right? And so I think it's similar to how you have to find ways to differentiate yourself and stand out amongst the others. And then there's always going to be the 80-20, where 80% of the business is done by 20% of the people. That's the same in real estate, and I believe it's the same in cannabis. But the one skill or thing that I feel will add much value to and help me stand apart is the systems and processes. I've always been big on that, automating, delegating, using virtual help when I can, but just putting really good technology systems and processes in place, and managing people, getting very experienced at, I can't say good because it's the biggest challenge I believe in most industries is managing people, right? But just all the years of training and all the books and information I consumed about leadership and empowering others, I think that I learned that all too well in real estate.
Yeah, real estate is one of those industries is an entrepreneurial minded industry. Anyone in it, whether you're an agent, you have your own, singular agent, you have your own business. I know yourself owning a brokerage is you operate as an agent. You got to manage other agents. There's a lot of different hats, a lot of different people you have to manage. And again, my experience with real estate shows that anybody in your position is in a never ending pursuit of mentorship, coaching,
Mhm.
skills, refining their own process and systems and process. It's not something that, like you said, you're like, I don't get great at it. It's experience.
Yeah.
You keep going. You don't get to a place like, yeah, I'm good. It's a never ending pursuit.
Mhm. One of the things that I believe most new agents and maybe even the consumers may not see is that every single time you close a transaction, you fire yourself, and it's back
Mm,
to regenerating new business, new clients, or following up with old leads. And it does not allow for complacency. If you take 3 months off with no work, you have no money coming in. Um, and so for me, it provides something here. And I actually noticed it in my first couple of weeks here, is that I have that same sort of, okay, the day is over. Okay, what about tomorrow? The week is over. The 4th of July sale's over. What's next? The weekend is done. But it's for me always saying, okay, now that that's over, how are we continuing to prospect and keep the pipeline full, right? That's the word I was looking for. But keeping that pipeline full, and that's stocking the shelves and all the other day to day things that you need to do to make sure that you have some money coming in next month after you sell out.
hmm Absolutely. And so you said, I know Michael personally, and so I know you said you met him through some real estate dealings and how that opened your realm. And I know when we spoke a week ago, you said you spent some time kind of just watching and learning under him. So I'm kind of curious how you how you approached that and kind of what you did in that period of just waiting and learning the game.
Yes, good question. So we, when you had the liquor store, we kind of, you met, we talked briefly, and we found some commonalities in our entrepreneurial journeys at the time. And when we first opened, I went and he said he was making a certain amount of money per month, and I was like, "That's great. That's a little bit more than I'm making in real estate." A couple months later, we're meeting again. He said he was making 3 times that amount, and then a few months later, he said he was making 7 times that amount. And I'll leave those numbers up for imagination. But at that moment, I said, "Okay, I'm in. I have to get into this business." And it's just part of my personal principles or values. Even my daughter said the other day, we mentioned it, and she said, "I thought you don't like we don't like free stuff." Because I've always taught them to despise free, right? That there's
Mm.
always a catch. And so in coming to Michael, I wasn't going to work for him. I didn't want anything for free. I'm sure he wasn't willing to give up anything for free, but I just had to, be present and figure out my angle and how I can get into the business. So I stayed around and we figured out, a few different things that I could do to help with the SOPs, the training, hiring, recruiting. Did things like that on a contract basis for the Kush 21 store, help it push it to um, multi-state. We ended up securing a license in Illinois through that. And then when the store that I now own came up as something that they needed to liquidate, get rid of, and sell it, and I told him that no, I'll buy it, and he advised me over and over again, even close to closing it. He wanted to say, "Now, remember, I'm telling you, I don't think it's a good idea for you to buy this store, but I like a challenge, and I flip houses, rehab them. I'm in the middle of flipping one right now in Ohio, and so for me to renovate or take something and turn it around is I'm passionate about it, and I feel like I'm up for the challenge. And the worst that could happen is I really don't see a downside on it, right? I have a license that has a tangible value to it. So
Mhm.
to me, it was like, hey, I weighed the upside, hedged for the downside, and thought it was a good deal.
Like a true real estate investor right there. Look at the upside, hedge the downside.
Yeah.
And that's again, being intimately familiar with that side of the market, right? Like real estate investing, it's all sort of a risk, but most people that are doing it got their spreadsheets, got their formula, got their model that they like to stick it in. And like you said, even at the worst case, you have an asset that, you know, some really the worst case you got to liquidate it, but worst you got to hold on to it for a couple of years and just wait for that value to come around, which I'm sure you're familiar with being in the real estate
I've been there
space.
before. Yeah.
Got to hold something for a little bit longer than you intended on holding it, but that's life, right?
Mhm.
You can't plan for everything. Um, what point in your journey did you really start getting involved in real estate? Because I'd read a little bit of one of the stories online and how you kind of had a big sale, I believe, if I'm correct, early in your career, and then didn't really have much action after that, and kind of had to stick it out and learn the game, like almost struck gold a little bit early, but then
Mhm.
had to figure it out. So I'm kind of curious a little bit of your journey in real estate in terms of like the start and when you really found that cadence and that pace.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I always have to say that when I tell the story, it seems fascinating because of the things and the process that I would not sign up voluntarily for the things I did. It's hard to imagine, like, and it just boils down to desperation or desire, right? So I started actually in the downturn, the worst economic
Mm.
downturn that most of us will see in our lifetime in 2008, and most people thought I was nuts. I remember even my uncle was like, "Do you watch the news? What do you mean you're getting into real estate?" And a lot of people were quitting, and it was not to in most people that are logical, right? It was not the smartest thing to do. And on top, to make it even worse, is our first house, um, we had a predatory lender. How about that?
Mm,
And so we bought a house in Lakewood that he told us we would get $50,000 cash when we close, and it'll go up so much and so fast that we had a reverse AM loan. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
mm-mm,
Reverse amortization loan. Basically, it works like this: your monthly payment should be 2,000, but because equity is increasing so much every single month, you only have to pay 1,500, and the equity will cover your payment.
mm,
No longer a product that anyone offers. It was part of the whole frenzy. So I say all that to say that we moved to Lakewood, but when I decided to get into real estate, I wanted to be in where the money was because I was watching $1 Million Listing, and I was like, I can do that. Those guys look cool. They drive great cars, and I was an iron worker at the time, so I hung my license in Bellevue, and it was an hour drive there and an hour drive back every single day. And to me, it was like one of those things where I'm so blessed and humbled that for that experience, because I never had read a book prior to that, but I stumbled across audiobooks, and I
mm,
would listen to an audiobook an hour there and an hour back every day. And I remember going to appointments, I'd pull up and be so um, wrapped up in the book that I would just sit there like consuming this information that was, fascinating to me because I had dropped out in eighth grade, so no formal education, and now I'm getting a master class in business and marketing and psychology, body language. I mean, I just went crazy and just consuming information. And so that first sale was in 3 months, and it just so happened to be at an open house. A guy walked in, wanted to pay cash for a $1 million house. He sold his stock in MySpace. He was a MySpace exec. And so just, the innate hustler or quality has always been in me. So I stayed there 4 days a week for 5 hours consistently. And then this guy just walks in and he's like, I want to write my own contract. I'd never written a contract. And I'm like, hey, well, why would you do that when I'm an expert and I could do it for you? I went back to the office and asked someone how to write this contract for $1 million. It closed in 7 days and I made 33,000, right? Um, and so that was like the hook. It kept me in. Had it not been for that, I would have quit in the next month or so. But I didn't sell a house for 9 months after that.
mm,
And it was the driving. And when I say drive an hour there, hour back, I would work for 14, 15 hours, sleep 4 or 5, just really grinding it out because I just felt like, I didn't really have much choice. But it was that information on those drives back and forth where I really changed my entire life. Like I understood complex ideas, and I remember having listening to someone with a problem, and in my mind, I had not really got to the point of confidence, but I remember thinking I have the answer. I could solve that person's
mm,
problem, or I have what they're looking for, or at least provide some value. But I'm like, who am I to give anyone advice, right? And that's just the becoming process of sitting there like, if it were a sitcom, you could almost just visualize it where I'm sitting there almost like, hey, I know the answer to that. Never in my life had I had an answer on how someone may be able to, change their life, or um, many different problems that one might have. But that to me was the beginning of understanding that my life and myself and the way I thought was changing. Even the way I talk came from someone hanging up on me, and another person asking me, was I asleep when I was making cold calls? And so I mumbled, and I would listen to people talk over and over again, so till I was able to articulate my words. So sometimes when I talk like that, it was because I would practice it on the phone to make sure that I talk like what I thought at the time was a white person, because I thought I needed to emulate that. Later on, I found out I was emulating middle-aged white woman culture, and kind of figured that that was the wrong thing to do when you get ultimate confidence and knowledge of self, right? But at the time, I needed to fit into white culture, and that was talking proper. So I studied and figured out one word a day I would learn how a new word, and just write it down, memorize it, repeat it, and try to use it in a sentence. But that process was what helped me be successful in real estate. And from there, after that 9 months, it took off, and I've increased my income every year since.
That's congrats on that. That's a feat, especially coming out of that market. And something I know about real estate. I always say, like, all real estate agents invest in real estate. Successful real estate agents start investing in other businesses. I don't know too many that can. It's like they're addicted to just investing in things. But I think, like, to your point, you just see the way your brain works, the way your systems work. Anything you can identify that can fit into some of that comprehension from real estate investing or rehabbing or flips. It's like it's an easy pathway. At what point did you break out of real estate and start in not just investing in properties and stuff like that, but starting to seek just investing in companies outside of real estate?
So early on, I think maybe 2 years into it, I got involved in network marketing, because they're great salespeople, and the dream seems so attainable. You can drive the Ferrari in 90 days if you go out and bother the shit out of your friends and family until they sign up for your products, right? So that was my first kind of venture into outside of real estate, but that short-lived, went back into real estate. And it was actually Nipsey Hussle inspired me, my business model, I believe, back in 2014. And I began to change how I saw real estate. No more was I focused on transactions or units, but how much can I net? And so I started to change. I actually completely changed my entire business model to make sure that I netted more off of every transaction than any other agents I knew, up to like 10% commissions, whatever, just figuring out that how ways to get paid more off a transaction. And then I branched off into investing in real estate. Tried a couple other businesses, but it just startups that, somehow I never got the unicorn. So, but each time I try, even the network marketing was an amazing experience because I learned about running a team and how to sell or pitch, because that was a hell of a pitch to get, and you need that person to sign up, become a affiliate that day. And so those were transferable skills to real estate, and a lot of other industries, but that network marketing is a great breeding ground. So I don't regret that. But other than that, it was just investing in real estate, going outside of other markets to buy and flip, doing workspaces, Airbnbs, Turo. So I just did just whatever I could, but most of it had a close relation to real estate or directly affiliated with real estate.
Yeah, that makes sense because it's just adjacent, right? While you're out there looking for properties, you just see opportunities, and the brain starts working. What was it about Nipsey Hussle that kind of changed? Just listening to his music, or was it his interviews, or all of it?
No, it was not his music at all. It was in the middle of a song. It's called I'll think of it.
Okay.
But in the middle of a song, he says, if you look at the movie industry, they don't base the success off of how many tickets sold. they base it off of what did it gross, right? And to interpret that is, say, a movie like Batman, they don't say Batman sold this many tickets. It says it grossed this. It would be based off of merch or some sort of memorabilia, all these different ways to take that movie and build ancillary products or businesses around it. And then that's what the movie grosses, right? And so that was, and he talked about the business models and how, race to the space and the industrial revolutions. And right now we're in the technology revolution, and it's the titans of industry tomorrow will be the people that figure out new business models.
Hmm.
And it just struck with me. I had two younger people working for me, and they thought I was nuts because I was like, "Hey, we're no longer working with buyers and sellers." And they're like, "Well, who are we working with?" And I said, "Only investors. We're going to invest. We're going to work with builders, developers, and investors, and we will take no listings, no buyer appointments." And that seemed scary because it was our bread and butter,
Hmm.
and it was new, audacious. But I figured if I worked with investors that had a brain like mine, and we were peers more so than, that whole relationship between, um, and being on the east side in Bellevue, it was very pretentious, very hard to get into. There was a certain uh, persona, or I don't know. It was not comfortable for a young black man. Uh, but this investor business also gave me the freedom to be more myself.
Hmm.
And so it was that thing in Nip that I ended up changing my business model that same week. My brokerage is actually named Prolific, Next Home Prolific,
Hmm.
um, in paying homage to Nipsey Hussle because he really had a integral part of my business model at that time.
Man, I love that. That's dope that you shared that too. We're big. Our staff over here, we're big fans of Nipsey from the music, and have done some work with the cannabis brand that his family carries on. But
Really?
yeah, down there in Cali, the
Yeah.
people that grew his original like Marathon OG strain, we work with them.
Okay.
Um, and it's just, I was just telling my video guy the other day, because we're all big Nipsey fans, and we're just watching. I don't know if you saw the documentary they put out on
Hmm.
the new. They just opened up the dispensary. The family did, but
Yep.
we, from being fans of the music, to hear him talking about rolling up Marathon OG before you could eat. It wasn't a legal product. It wasn't even like something you
Hmm.
could just go buy even in the streets. And then we were in LA one time and at the store, and we're like, "Hey, where can we get this Marathon OG? Like, is it anywhere?" The dude behind the counter, who ends up being in the documentary I just saw, I've never
Yeah.
seen him outside of that. He gave us a card for this place. It was called, I don't want to say the business, but it wasn't a weed business. It was a
Hmm.
different kind of company, and it was just just the hood spot, just the pop up, underground weed store. And you go in there and they got t-shirts and v-necks and the different sizes, and it's like a dub price, an eighth price, half ounce price or some shit.
Yeah. I've
And
been
we
there.
bought it, and it was rolled up in a CD sleeve with the Marathon, like a blank clear
Hmm.
CD sleeve. And when we're watching the documentary, they're like, "Oh, back in the day, we were just hustling stuff out of the CD sleeves."
Yeah.
And so to hear about the music, to try it in that model, to then work with the actual licensed producer putting out his grow, I was just telling my guy, I was like, we really seen that. It was just crazy to just from a fan, right? I had nothing to do with it business wise, but just to be a part of that and see that whole
Hmm.
rise, and then watch that documentary and be like, damn, I saw that at every step
That's
of the way,
crazy.
man.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely impressive. He's a huge inspiration to me. After that, I learned a lot more about his business acumen and his process and just how brilliant he was. And I saw a lot of similarities. And I've read hundreds of books, been to many trainings, personally mentored by Darren Hardy, but I've learned the most, I would say, tangible pieces of wisdom or knowledge between Jay-Z and Nipsey Hussle
Mm,
about my business. And literally, like, it's hard to imagine how so many people miss it. so many different principles and things that you can apply to business or even in your personal life
Right.
that they've been explaining and really articulating for so long.
Mm-hmm.
I learned the hard way what he meant. Jay-Z and Reasonable Doubt talked about chains are cool to cop, but more important are lawyer fees.
Mm-hmm.
And had I not had one of the best lawyers in the state in Bellevue while I was doing real estate, I would have lost a lot of money. But having this at the forefront of my repertoire of tools helped me. And looking back, he said that on his first album, and I'm like, wow, that was so profound. Now I tell people this and they still won't listen, but I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, this is part of business, especially if you're a marginalized community or someone that's a target. You have to have a good attorney, right? That's just one example of so many things I get from listening to their music, I consume all of their interviews, books, documentaries, whatever it is, because there's so many different pieces of wisdom and jewels that you can, are applicable to different businesses, not just the music industry, not just real estate.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, and those are two of my most listened artists right there. Hove
Okay.
and Nip are two of the ones that I listen to the most, and very much for the same reason. I mean, they make music that's great, but like if you and they say some hard ass bars, but like you said, like even that lawyer fees one is like he said some hard ass bar in like '96 that's like
Hmm.
a business print, one of the core principles of business.
Yeah.
It's a way that could be understood and learned from, and that's what yeah, I'm a big fan of those. But on the topic of like coming from a marginalized community in the space of cannabis, right? Like the black population, I think I don't know, there's different numbers. 13% of the U.S. or something like that is black. I've done read some studies on cannabis use where they say it's statistically insignificant uh, use percentage based on race, right? Like every race, the same percentage of that race pretty much uses not just cannabis, but drugs in general. At around, there's no difference, right? No, you're not more likely to do drugs based on your race. But when you look at the ownership of cannabis, right, it's like under 2%. There's a varying numbers you've seen out there. It's 1.3 to zero point 0.9 to 1.7. I see varying numbers. I don't know what's actually what, but it's under 2%. What does it mean to be, an African American owner in an industry where the statistics? I mean, when you look at the war on drugs, lean so far heavily one way, and then on the other end of the spectrum in legal ownership, they lean so much more the other way. So what does it mean to you to be a part of like the positive statistic, but what's that statistic also mean to you as well?
I think cannabis is one area, right? And it gets a lot of publicity and attention, maybe because it's a new space, but that's not the only industry where it's heavily weighted on the opposite end, right? So for me, what it means is when I opened the only black brokerage on the east side, it's more of a beacon of hope of like, hey, let's march and same things, putting information out. I'm here to show the way, show everyone. I've always been an open book, and there's a lot of people that charge for the information that I give away, but I just hope that it gives me enough of a platform to help and gather some more like-minded individuals that can get into this. The money for me, I came up with all the money on my own to buy the store. I sold some of my rental properties, and the astonishing part about that is I've been trying to raise this money for 2 years to buy other stores. Every time they would come up, I would gather people, I would sit down, explain it to them in detail about, hey, here's a license that's a state that's opening up. I have the inside, I can get us in, we can get a license here. Here's what it takes. Here's a store that's for sale. If 10 of us bring 100 grand, we can buy this store. Just really really trying to get people to gather. It all it we're I'm really trying to be careful what I say because I don't want this to come across as offensive or undermine any other struggles or things that we've been through. But at this point, there is no more. There's not much excuse left, right? It's about us um, getting together. Group economics. One of the things that Nipsey spoke about a lot. If we can gather our resources, pull our resources, our genius, our smarts, our um, influence together, there's this industry is wide open right now. I believe until it goes federally legal, and I feel like there's just such a opportune time for Black people to finally come together, pull our resources together, and create a collective identity where we can, you know, enter this space. And what a lot of people don't mention, or maybe I am mistaken by this, but every person that I know, white, Jewish, Chinese, however, Indian, they've done it one way, and that is coming together. There is no lone rangers. We have this misguided perception that
Mm,
these people that we see on the forefront or the face or the CEOs or the founder of the company did it themselves. It makes me kind of an anomaly that I did it myself, but it's because I had no choice, right? It's way harder, and you end up like in a very vulnerable position. For me to be the only one, to be alone, my own money, which is not very much compared to, say five white guys that brought their money together, and somehow we're just missing that. There's nothing missing. We have everything we need to enter the cannabis industry in a forceful, major way, but it won't be done alone.
mm,
It's accumulatively. If we were to get together, establish group economics, some principles, we have more trust, more camaraderie, where we can actually believe that there is hope, right? Hopelessness, I think, it runs rampant also in the community that prevents us from moving forward. But the main thing is this lack of group economics. And if there's people that are watching this that they have a little bit of money, it doesn't have to be a lot of money. I've seen it happen in real estate all the time. OPM.
mm,
Um, it just is part of the most successful wealthy people's business strategy. There's crowdfunding, there's the raising fund, there's just it's just how it happens. And until we get this, come together and stop trying to do it alone, we'll continue to perpetuate this same sort of atrocity. Instead of saying, okay, I trust this person and I'm going to put up my money. um, Unfortunately, if it were you know another culture, they have no problem.
mm,
um, and I've witnessed it for many, many years. So that's what it means to me. It's not like standing at the mountaintop, really ready to celebrate and count a bunch of money. Now I'm like, hey, now do I have someone's attention? Now can
mm,
we do this now for the sake of our generations to come, my kids? Do we always have to be last?
mm. You spitting gospel right now, man. What's the importance of ownership for you? Like just in the theme of ownership as well, not just necessarily ownership in the cannabis space.
So I hope you don't mind, since you brought it up, I'll have to continue to quote Jay-Z and Nip.
Oh, run
But
it.
um, Jay-Z talks about what's free. They let you run a checkup, but they never give you leverage. Without leverage, it does not matter how successful you are as a real estate agent, how successful you are as a cannabis owner. If you don't have leverage or some sort of backing or something that helps, um, it's like to me, it's like a foundation, right? it's flimsy and it won't stand if you don't have some sort of support system. So when I talk about ownership and uh, leverage, it's more so that I can pass this on to my kids and that I can have something that I don't have to continue to work. I work like a pit bull right now, day and night, so that I don't have to work, right? So that I can finally breathe and be able to change the trajectory of the Black American experience. Because it's sad and it's one of those things where I did not really, I was not like a champion for the cause. I was born Black, so you're always going to be a supporter of the cause. You're always going to, yeah. But when it changed for me was after I got a little success and they attacked me. And I really don't want to go into it because no one will really believe to what level this sort of institutional racism existed within Windermere. If I go ahead and name a few names. But it was sad and tragic. And guess what? I couldn't do nothing because I can't beat them. I can't fight them. I don't have. I mean, call the NAACP, Al Sharpton. Like I'm literally out here fighting. I had to fight a rape case. Someone randomly says that I raped him, so I had to spend $80,000 to fight that. There's We can name a host full of Black people, white people, a lot of people that did not have access to $80,000 and probably in prison right now because of the lack of funds, right? um, I would get complaints to the DOL consistently. I would have my things vandalized. It was literally like, wow, I can't believe no one's happy that I'm doing well out here.
Mm.
This is weird. And then you look around and you don't have the support of your community or anyone else. And so it was lonely. So all of a sudden, that became my passion, is to go out and find another brilliant, young, ambitious Black man like me that has no options or no hope, and provide that hope so they don't have to experience what I went through. I mean, it literally tenses me up and gets me so heated when I think about, like, all I was doing was doing my business. And I will say I didn't take crap from people. That was the thing, is I would not let them bully me. And it got to a point where I started to change that. And I used to say, you know what, I better keep my mouth shut and let them
Mm.
do whatever they can to me, because me speaking up or complaining only gets me in more, you know, trouble. And I just want to I just want to feed my family.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I need to be, targeted like this? But it was mainly because I didn't take shit. I wasn't the token, stereotypical Black guy that they let into high society, right? It was more of unapologetically me inside your space, and that was not acceptable.
Mm. I like that. So you said you didn't come out born for the cause. Just life experience kind of shaped you to see more of this stuff, and then it inspired you to kind of speak out, or like you said, not even necessarily speak out, but just be a beacon of what can be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, because it's one of the things that we find a lot. 50 Cent talked about it, is people think I'm trying to pull a fast one on them. When I'm like, come here, meet me. I'll show you exactly how to do this. I won't charge you any money, and I'll guide you along. I'll mentor you, and I'll make sure you have everything you need to be successful. And what do they think? Must be a scam.
Mm.
Must be something in it, right? Like it's hard for people to believe that I actually have an innate desire to help. And to me, it's a personal passion. I really want to be able to have another Black man in Washington open a store that I can help guide, or someone gets in real estate, does successful, be able to quit their job, create generational wealth, passive income. Those things are, money. Making money is obviously more um, necessity, but for me, where I find the fulfillment and sort of excitement is helping other young people that come from similar backgrounds, right? That it's just hard to believe for people to believe that I actually want to help them.
Absolutely. Man, I love that. So, tying it back in before we get out of here, you said the store grand opening 2 weeks, second week of August. Is there an official date on that? You said it was the second week of August.
No, it's not an official date, but
Okay.
yeah, I'm working with an event planner right now. I want to make sure that it's something for the community that they'd be proud of. So
Awesome. And then we're on Highway 99 in Everett, Pleasant Trees, opening second week of August.
currently, we're operating as Local Routes Highway 99. We're open right now.
We're open right now.
Grand opening is the 10th.
So we can say people still pull up and support Local Routes on 99 out here in Everett, switching over to Pleasant Trees here shortly. Definitely, I'll come out. Like I said, I'll come show out for the grand opening. Come out and support, man.
All right.
You got to slide. Well, I appreciate you, Kenny. I really appreciate you coming on here and shedding some wisdom, some insight on your journey. And there was just a ton of game in here for I think anyone looking to learn and grow in business. And that's one of the beautiful things and I like about this platform is, some of the guests I do are in cannabis, some of the people I do are in music. I always try to get something from each guest that whether you're in cannabis or you don't give a shit about cannabis, but you're in whatever you're in, you got a business, you got a hustle, you're an entrepreneur. There's some sort of game you can extract. And I think you gave out a couple gallons of game today.
Appreciate that. I appreciate you having me on here, and hopefully we'll have a follow-up where I can tell you about those people that I found to inspire and put in good positions.
Awesome. Yeah. We're waiting on it, man. It'll all do time. So this is the RMR Podcast, episode 45. Kenny Pleasant of Pleasant Trees, opening up here in Washington here